A little bit.
Wait.
You.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily.
I'm Justin.
He's Justin. And this is Synthesis, our webcast that brings together nonconformist leaders like ourselves and our guests, whose ideas make them and us see the world differently. This is our 6th episode, and we're really excited to have Elijah with us today, and I'm going to introduce him to you, our lovely audience. So Elijah's career has included a ton of interesting stuff. He has negotiated with Hollywood studios, coordinated with the U.S. Secret Service, managed celebrity events, facilitated CEO roundtables, he's lectured at universities, and this is an interesting one, we may get into this. He's testified as an expert witness on branding.
I did.
Justin and I consider ourselves branding.
We've never testified.
No, we've never.
We've testified, but we've never testified.
Yeah, it wasn't that kind of testimony, yeah.
But anyway, so that's something very interesting. In addition to that, he's a local, just a guy that organizes cool shit, let's be honest. You've created a groundbreaking fast pitch event for social innovators, which we'd love to talk about, and piloted a public speaking program for an international corporation. Right now, Elijah is the managing partner of the experience firm and leads a charge on convincing companies to create remarkable experiences for their customers. So by connecting experience creators with organizations that are looking to do remarkable things, Elijah believes we can prove the greatest ROI comes from investing in people. Yay, also a passionate public speaker, Elijah often asks from the stage, what would happen if you were nicer to people and did more interesting things? And I'm sure you've gotten some good answers along the way. So welcome.
Welcome, Elijah.
Thank you. That's a very long bio. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no.
It was very interesting.
I think our audience was fascinated, so
Right.
I do not accept your apology.
We always like to point out how we met. You and I met briefly at what would you call that thing that Paul put together? Like like a thought leadership salon, dinner with scoundrels.
Ish thing, right?
Yeah, something. And then you read Court Dial's book, and we're mentioned in there. So we reached back out, and we found out that we've been best friends for 40 some years and just didn't know it until recently. So, a fellow Austinite who's been here longer than me. So one of the questions is, when do you sleep? Because as all the stuff you're doing, plus you're a dad and a husband and a human, when do you sleep? And how much sleep do you get?
Am I supposed to be honest?
Yeah.
So the one good habit I have is that I go to the gym about 5 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
AM or PM?
AM.
Okay.
AM. And but I'm lucky if I'm in bed by 1 on any given night.
That's what I figured. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not advocating that people should not sleep, because I should sleep more. There are days when it definitely catches up to me. But yeah, I mean, I probably I'll average 4 hours a night, and then every once in a while I just crash hard.
Yeah.
I'll sleep till like 10 o'clock on a Saturday. My kids are like, "You're a lazy bum," and I'm like, "Get out of my room."
I pay the bills.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, besides that, I'm glad to hear you do get some long nights of sleep. But besides that, we want to start by casting it way back, and want to ask you, what is your most lasting memory of childhood?
Oh my God.
Right?
I probably should have read the questions in advance, shouldn't I?
Just a softball to start.
Or a memory. Like when you think of your childhood, what comes to mind?
Suck. So we lived mostly way out in the middle of the woods. And it's so I'll never understand why, but there's a one of these sort of it's not a fairy tale, but like a scary story called Taily Po. Do you guys hear about this? Okay, so my kids have actually just read it now, like but they're like in fourth and sixth grade. So I remember they read it to us in kindergarten. I feel like we used to terrorize kids in ways that we don't now. I mean, we have movies now that kids didn't have, but like we were a lot less worried about kids' feelings when we were younger. And so they read us this horrible, horrible ghost story about this guy who lives in the woods, and there's like this weird dog badger looking thing, and it lures his dogs out in the woods, and they don't come back, and then it appears at his foot of his bed and like murders him or something, right? And so they read this to us in kindergarten, and then it's so like that was one of those things that stayed with me because we lived in the middle of the woods alone, right? So I was probably my kid's age now. I think I was 12. And we are in a cabin way out in the woods. And my mom is working because she always worked, she was a single mom, worked like 3 jobs. And I hear something like scratching outside the window. And I'm like just terrified, right? Like just like, and I could go to the window and peek out. And this little black face that looks just like the freaking picture in the book appears in the window. And I just nearly died on the spot. And it was just like the neighbor's dog who was lost in like, and I ended up I kind of gathered myself and opened the door, like I know that this is not real. It was just this cute little friendly dog which wanted to hang out, but it was like my whole nightmare was happening. I mean, that's crazy weird. I don't know.
That's awful.
Wow.
So that would qualify as a memory, also a scar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out to be a really nice dog.
Well, maybe it has a happy ending.
So maybe it's like the message is there's like face your fears. They're not nearly as bad as you think. I think.
Right. That's true. But and a cabin out in the middle. What was that? North Carolina, then, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Did you enjoy spending time in the wilderness like that, kind of being away, or what joy did you find in it?
So yeah, it really is something that's truly blissful. I mean, I'm a true extrovert now, and I hate being alone. But growing up, it wasn't really an option. We weren't around a lot of people, and so I would just go out with the dogs in the woods, and we would literally get lost for hours and hours and hours. And I grew up in this time and place where it was like, hey, listen, don't come back before dark and don't come back after dark. Like,
Right.
if I don't see you here, right when the sun goes down, you're in trouble. But otherwise, I don't want to see you for a while. And that was it. We'd just go get lost in the woods and do really stupid stuff. If occasionally we'd have, go catch up with neighborhood friends. And when I say neighborhood friends, I mean like people who lived like within 10 miles.
Right.
And go like literally just go climb a cliff and just see if we didn't die, which as it turned out we never did, which is really kind of baffling.
That's amazing. Free roam, like free range kids. I loved it.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Everyone's kids. That's a good way to put it. So tell the short story, the brief story of how you got from the backwoods of North Carolina to USC.
Okay, so as I mentioned a moment ago, I grew up in the backwoods of North Carolina, and I thought, what would be great would be not living in the backwoods of North Carolina. So when it came time to apply for college, my only criteria, I kid you not, was how far away a school was. So I looked at California, I looked at Texas, I looked at Hawaii and Maine. I'm like, Maine's too cold, so that was out. And I got accepted to University of Southern California, and I got on a plane, and that was it. I knew at 18 I was out of there. Like that was my sentence. At 18 I was out.
So when you first get to California, you get off the plane, what was sort of what's your memory of that experience of coming into this new culture, basically?
It's one of those things that in retrospect is hard to imagine like this. So I was this kid, I had $50 to my name, and I had a suitcase, an old suitcase that had been my grandfather's, and everything I owned in that suitcase. And it wasn't like kids go to college, they're like, okay, I'm going to go to college and then I'll come. Like that was it. I just went. There was no going back. There was nowhere to go back to. I had moved out. I was on my own. And so I got to LAX and I went to the baggage claim and I got my bag, my only bag. And I saw somebody, it was, all the freshmen and everyone else were arriving for college. And so I saw someone with a USC shirt on and I said, do you know how to get to USC from here? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, is it close? Like, can you walk? Because I don't know. Like, I've never, and he just looked at me like, nothing you're saying is making any sense. So and finally he just just get in the van. Just get in the van. And so this guy, I don't know whatever happened. Dan Perez de la Garza spent the rest of his day. He dropped off everybody he was supposed to drop off, and then he spent the rest of his day taking me around trying to figure out like where I was supposed to live and like how I was supposed to sign up for classes, like all the stuff that most kids do before they get to college. I did the first 4 days after I got to college.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's incredible. So you guys stayed in touch for a while?
He said, listen, I'm in this fraternity and we have, barbecues every Thursday. So there's free food. You can at least get a meal. Like, cause I like that $50 wasn't going to last me very long. And so I went, there's lots of free food the first week of college. I don't know. So I went to a luncheon and met a guy there who was also an engineering student. And I'm like, hey, there's a barbecue tonight. He's like, awesome, free food, let's do that. And then he ended up joining and becoming the president of the fraternity. So I was hung around there a lot, even though I never joined the fraternity.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
So you have this super unique background that obviously, but we still learn systems and methods and sort of life systems, belief systems along the way.
Yeah.
When do you have a moment or a realization that what you were taught wasn't going to serve you? Either a political belief, a religious belief, a life belief, career belief, whatever, where you're just like, wait a minute, I don't believe that. And that doesn't serve, that's not going to work for me.
So, I mean, the odd juxtaposition of my growing up was that I had already sort of rejected all the belief structures that I'd been introduced. Mm-hmm. So the things that stuck with me, so if you grew up in the South, there's this whole sort of Southern hospitality, right? You hold doors for people. You say please, you say thank you. People used to get irritated with me in California. They thought like I was trying to prove something. And like, I just holding the door. I'm sorry. Like, but what ended up happening, so I had definitely decided that the life that my mom wanted in North Carolina was not a life that I wanted. The belief structures that she had put in place for her life were not belief structures that I wanted for my life. But I still sort of had that sort of ethos of I grew up in rural North Carolina and I was polite to people, even though I wasn't very outgoing at the time. And that ended up serving me extraordinarily well because it stood out dramatically in Southern Cal, just being polite to people, especially when I ended up working in the movie business.
Yeah. That's good. That's validation for me because one of the things I'm like a super stickler about with my kids is manners. And I always say that like that is the best life prep because you got to be able to show up with impeccable manners and that will make you stand out. So
it was interesting for me growing up in not the same environment as you, but similar. And my mom grew up dirt poor, like dirt floor poor.
Oh, yeah.
He was such and still is a stickler for like table manners and social decorum because where she came from, that wasn't a thing. There was no social decorum. And, so don't put your elbows on the table and don't chew with your mouth full. And heaven forbid you do the thing where you shove your peas onto your fork. Inevitably, you get the haft end of a butter knife whapping you on the knuckles. So that's why I learned my manners through violence.
Well, that was standard protocol where we grew up, right? Like, I mean, just hit your butt. Like,
I had many other things that happened to me that were far more wounding than getting hit on the knuckles by a butter knife. So
you survived. So you showed up. You mentioned engineering. So you come out to California, and you think that engineering is going to be your way forward. And then, when does that change?
Yeah.
How does that change?
Terrible student, super good at math. So I had great math scores. So, I mean, if we're being full disclosure, right? So I applied to USC. When I got in, my guidance counselor tried to convince me that I was mistaken, that maybe I had gotten into the University of South Carolina, but definitely not the University of Southern California. I was like, if I'm not sure what school I got into, I probably shouldn't go to college at all. But as it turned out, I mean, I checked every box, right? They have certain, boxes they're trying to fill. So they need more Black kids. They need more engineering students. They need more kids from rural places like North Carolina. And I just checked all the boxes, right? Also, like most of like Cherokee Indian, right? So they're like, this guy's in. I was not a great student, but I did have, was good at math by North Carolinian standards. I got to USC and found out that there are kids who are really good at math. Like,
yeah, right.
which is why engineering didn't last that long. I mean, I remember offering to study with one of the kids in my class who was on a full scholarship from the Turkish government. And he didn't just ace every test in every class we had. He blew the curve completely out of the water because almost everybody graded on the curve. And so he would just destroy the rest of us. And so I'm like, well, he lived next to me. I'm like, hey, let's study together. And I sat down with him for maybe 20 minutes and realized I don't even know what he's talking about. Like whatever is happening in his mind it doesn't, I got nothing. So I just, I moved on.
Awesome.
And so then what did you end up majoring in, and how did you find your way there?
So I did what any smart college student does at that point. I just started taking whatever classes seemed like fun, right?
Absolutely.
So I took communications, I took theater, I took philosophy, I took psychology, I took cinema. And one day I met with the guidance counselor because I think they told me that I had to. And he's like, what are you trying to accomplish here? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying not to go back to North Carolina. And, he's like, well, you have to pick something at some point. So we sat down and looked at, the continuity between all the different things I was doing and realized that the common thread, which I had sort of discovered, just based on different conversations we were having, was all about human behavior, right? All about why humans do the things that they do and trying to understand basic human motivation, which has always been fascinating to me. And so that's really what I do today. I just do it in a marketing context now.
Interesting. So we talk, kind of making that leap from then to today, we talk a lot about, in kind of the center of what we do with brand, is that your mission is in the middle of your brand, like the seed that holds all of your brand. So this philosophy that you have that Em mentioned in your bio about investing, the highest ROI is creating experiences and being kind and things like that. When did these ideas start to dawn for you in your development as a thought leader coming out of, in college, coming out of, when did you start to get some of these ideas that eventually became the experience company?
All right. So a little bit of background. So the most important class I ever took in college, bar none, was life-saving. I became a lifeguard. And then even though I barely passed the class, I got to work at the college pool where nobody ever drank. You have to be able to swim just to be in the pool anyway. So, but what I did was I grew up cleaning out stalls, right? So if something needed to be done, if there was a dirty job, a lot of these kids who went to Southern California are like, I'm not touching that. Like, I don't care. So I would dig in, I would literally climb down in this pit where this observation tank next to the diving pool and dug out like 3 feet of sludge that even the maintenance crew didn't want to deal with. And so they just kept saying like, well, how about this? How about that? I'm like, yeah, no problem. And so I kept getting more and more opportunities. And what happened is I ended up working on a movie, a TV commercial where they were shooting at the pool. And some people got into an argument and I just kind of jumped in there and broke it up because I'm trying to keep the peace. It's just kind of how I'm wired. And so 1 week out of school, somebody called and said, hey, I think someone in the PR department wants to hire you. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I got offered this job to be the liaison between the university and the film studios, which is a ridiculous job for a kid who was homeless 4 years prior, right? Mm-hmm. And it paid more money than I had ever thought of. And then I got to go and work on, with all the famous actors that everybody gets to see every day and work on with all the major studios. And I would bring hundreds and hundreds of people to USC for different events, for different production related things. And I got one single complaint over and over again for 8 years. One single complaint. And I think I probably told you this, Justin. I don't know, Emily, if you had to guess what the number one complaint I got over 8 years was, what would be your guess?
You're too nice.
I had to learn not to be so nice because I was a pushover at first because I just believe people in the film business, they're like, oh, you'll never know we were here. That turned out not to be true. But no, believe it or not, it was. So I'm bringing all these people to campus, and a lot of whom have never been there before. And the number one negative piece of feedback that I got, which was very consistent, was the guy at the parking booth is an asshole. Oh. And so here you've never been to campus before. You show up and there's somebody wearing a USC shirt, USC hat. They're the first official representative you've ever met, and they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to give you any information. They're like, "Do you have $6 or not?" You're like, "I have questions." They're like, "I don't have time for you. Just give me the money and go park." You're like, "I don't know where to go." And they're like, "It's over that way," right? And that was the culture of the transportation department at the time, is that they just thought that like they would hire those people, they paid them the least amount of money, they gave them the least amount of training, and they didn't treat them very well. And so those people were just like, look, I got to stand here in this booth all day long. I've heard every question that you could possibly think of every time, so many times, and I just don't want to hear it again. So give me $6. I'm going to give you a piece of paper and you go park. And I don't care if you get a ticket. I don't care if you park in the right place or not. That doesn't affect me at all. Ultimately, if you get a ticket, my department makes more money and everybody seems happier. So like, I would go to transportation services and I would go, "Hey guys, this is a problem." And they would go, "You work in the PR department. This is transportation. It's not your problem." So I would go to my boss and I would talk to, a vice president in public relations and say, "Hey guys, this is a problem." They go, "Listen, this is public relations, that's transportation. It's not your problem." I'm like, "It's my problem because they're complaining to me. The people that I bring here, the people that I'm supposed to take care of, are getting treated poorly by somebody who works for USC in an official capacity." And everybody just thought I was out of my mind. And then finally one day some big university donor came in, the gate where there's the official fancy gate where the donors come in, and then there's the other gates. And one of the donors came in one of the other gates and met one of those people, and then heads rolled. The head director got fired and everybody, and then they're like, "Oh, this is an issue." I'm like, "You don't say." So I left there. I came to Austin. I ended up working for a startup. Because we're a health company. He's like, "Well, how much is it going to cost?" I'm like, "I don't know, $50 a week maybe." And he's like, "I don't have the budget for that." We would have, we would spend hundreds of dollars on pizza and beer every single week. I'm like, And looking at the continuity between these two things, the bottom line is you can't say one thing and do another, right? Like, so your brand is not decided by what you say. It's 100% decided by what you do, right? And so the failure of that particular department and the failure of that particular company became just so painfully obvious to me that I decided that that's really where I wanted to focus my energies. And I've been kind of obsessed with that ever since. I'd never heard of Seth Godin at the time, but since then I've read so many of Seth's books. I'd heard of word of mouth marketing as a topic. I didn't know they were experts in this field. I didn't know the guys like Guy Kawasaki were out there preaching this kind of stuff. But once I found out that they were, and I wasn't the only one in the world who thought this, I got kind of carried away.
So why do you think people are, the whole idea of experience, it intrigues me because people are really hungry for it now. Why do you think why do you think that is?
Everybody woke up one day and was like, "Hey, wait a minute. You know what's better? Better experiences." I really, honestly, Emily, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's a great conference called Mini Trends that my friend helped put together. I don't, mini trends and macro trends. I think that the whole experience revolution, like the culture revolution business right now, is a macro trend. I think that if I had to, if pressed, I would say that, look, the data speaks for itself. We have more data than we've ever had in the past. And clearly, when you look at the success of a company like Zappos that charges more for the same product, and the only differentiator is they have a much better experience, right? Mm-hmm. And they made, I think they were $1 billion company in 2010. I was speaking at conferences all over the place, and I would ask everybody if they'd ever heard of Zappos, and like one person out of 100. I'm saying, so how can a company make $1 billion selling something that nobody knows about, right? Mm-hmm. And with no marketing? And that's how powerful customer experience is. Mm-hmm. Is that everybody who has an experience with Zappos goes and tells somebody else, and then they just keep making more and more money.
So what? So when we talk, the three of us talk, and we've done, this kind of the idea for Synthesis was meeting people like you, that where we feel a kinship, but the rest of the world thinks we're crazy. Yeah. And
maybe not. I mean, honestly.
So we would head nod. We'd be like, yeah, well, no, duh, that's the way it works. Why do you think? Well, I want to ask a question this way: what kind of resistance do you get when you present these ideas to large, to companies, and you're saying, hey, let's shift the dollars away from this and put it in experience and just your general ideas, and you go be Elijah in front of them, what resistance or reticence do you get?
It's kind of the if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right, kind of thing. So, Court in his book calls it the drift, right? It doesn't matter how good the idea is that you present to somebody. Inevitably, somebody who means well, who is a trusted advisor, is going to come along and say, do we really have to do that thing that guy said? I mean, I understand it sounds great, but what if it goes wrong? And, this company is doing well. You're not hiring consultants like us if business isn't going okay, right? I mean, you had to have a certain amount of success to be able to do that. So when we come in talking about radical changes, right, even the idea of treating your customers that much better is radical. And we're working with a car dealership, a very successful car dealership. And, we spent months developing different things that they could do. They said they wanted to be the best. They said they wanted to go head to head with the best in the business. And we developed these ideas, and they said, we love these ideas. And I went away going, I did my job. Like, I set them up for success. This is fantastic. The work we did is the right work. I brought in the right partners. And then they went and talked it over with, their family who've been in the business forever and their leadership team. And people are like, well, do we really have to do that kind of stuff? I mean, we can just advertise more and sell more cars, right? Like, we don't really have to treat people. We treat them pretty well. That's usually we treat people pretty well,
Yeah.
Good as the enemy of great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, interesting.
So, do you get frustrated when you have low times?
Oh my God.
When you get frustrated, I'll just say it that way. When you get frustrated, what do you kind of return to? We talk a lot about mission in our work and defining that for leaders and sort of drawing that line of sight from what they do every day to their mission on earth. So is that something that you go to, or what do you turn to when you get discouraged?
I don't have a lot of bad days. I refer you back to the previous conversation where I literally used to live in a barn. I don't have a lot of bad days, but when I do, it's just that really wanting to make things better and feeling just kind of really disillusioned that people fundamentally don't want to make things better. They don't care enough to make things better. This whole idea that for a lot of people in the world, good enough is good enough.
Yeah.
That drives me crazy. I just feel like if we can make things better, why wouldn't we?
Right.
Yeah.
And to your point, I mean, that's why I want to surround myself with people who think that way and who.
Do you see that in some of the social good that you've created opportunities for other social good organizations? Is that an outlet for you? Is that a way? And do you see the impact that they're making, or how does that inspire you?
So the short answer is yes. I mean, that is the beauty of social good organizations, is that they are clear about why they exist, unlike a lot of for-profit companies. Social good organizations are often trying to make a profit, but that's not why they exist, right? They look at profit as being a reasonable outcome of doing what they do well and meeting the needs of the community. And so I do love those companies. At the end of the day, though, as I dove into this whole social good thing, we launched Social Good TV, and I interviewed all these people, and I really tried to understand what makes an organization a great social good organization. And I've never escaped the belief that an organization that invests in the people who work for that organization such that they are able to make their lives better and their children's lives better and their community's lives better is doing as much or more social good than somebody who's giving away shoes to kids in a third world nation. And I'm all for giving away shoes to kids in a third world nation, but I really like to see an investment in sort of the marginalized members of our society, which are the people who bust their asses every day to provide for their kids and get paid jack for it.
Yeah, it so resonates with me, as I do believe in social good, and then conscious capitalism, John Mackey, the inherent good of the free market. Very much believe in that. Just my own personal view that the cure for rampant capitalism isn't rampant socialism. It's rampant free market, and because it works every time it's tried. But I see this social good is applied to clean water initiatives in third world countries, and that's great. But we have this enormous, underserved, marginalized, as you said, these everywhere from bored suburban kids doing stupid shit to desperately poor rural people, desperately poor urban people, and so many opportunities there to use your brand equity to reach people. So for example, like Mike Rowe and what he's doing with MicroWorks and trying to encourage young people to get into the trades, because that's a really good job. And actually you can be an entrepreneur in the trades as well. And so it's more just validating. I don't have a question behind that. It's just more validating the idea that maybe we should do some of this social good with our own citizens and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to get into a whole rabbit hole here, but I'm adjunct at
all about rabbit holes. It's okay.
Okay, excellent. I'm adjunct at ACC, the ACC Cup, and one of the things we're dealing with now, I work with the continuing education department. This reality that we're just pushing kids to go to college because it's like anything else. Look what we've done, right? Like that's a great thing to strive for. Go to college, get a 4-year degree. Well, first of all, the majority of 4-year degrees are liberal arts degrees, right? 80%, and there aren't that many liberal arts jobs out there, right? We're just sending kids to go to college just for the sake of getting a degree, and they're getting a degree. And I'm going and speaking to hundreds of students at a time and saying, okay, so how many of you did everything you were ever told to do? Like went to school, got good grades, went to a good college, got good grades, graduated. Now you're ready for the job that you were promised since you were 7 years old. And they're like, yep. And I'm like, how many of you just realized that's all bullshit? And they're like, yep. And how many of you are totally pissed off about this? And they're like, yep. It's a racket, right? And so colleges, I mean, you're seeing some of the most like striking failure of capitalism is when demand goes down, so people raise prices to try to create more demand or to try to maintain their profits because no one's buying this anymore. Like, oh, nobody wants this cup anymore. Well, now they're $100 because I'm trying to keep no, I don't need that cup that bad, right? And so that's what's happening with college right now is that you keep jacking up the prices because people are realizing there are better choices. I talked to an engineer at General Motors. He goes, my 14-year-old cousin can do everything important that I do. And he didn't learn any of it in school. He just, he has his own GitHub, right? And he's been developing code since he was 12. And he might be 15 now. And he's like, everything that I do that makes me valuable to General Motors, my 15-year-old cousin can do. Yeah. College is silly right now. And that's a major problem. And so continuing education is trying to look at that and figure out what is it, bless you, that what can we teach people to help them actually move forward in their lives rather than just trying to convince them that everyone's supposed to go down this certain path.
So what are those things? I mean, what if you got to design the curriculum, like a new kind of standard or model? In your mind, what should people be learning?
I'm so glad you asked. So a friend of mine told me that I spend so much time consulting with businesses and telling them what they should do, that maybe I should just go build a business the way that I tell everybody that they should. And I really didn't have any good argument for that. And so shortly thereafter, somebody came to me and said, hey, we have this business plan for building a recreational robotics facility, and we'd like for you to step in as a CEO and run it. And I couldn't come up with any good excuses not to do it. So I said yes, largely in part because of the question that you just asked, which is, what is it that our kids actually need to be learning? I'm like, everybody, any teacher worth their salt, my wife happens to be one of them. She has a master's in early childhood education, which is awesome because our kids are ahead of the curve in just about every conceivable way. The downside of which being I lose all parenting arguments by default. But project-based learning is figuring out what kids care about, and the schools who have tried this stuff, like the kids excel so far and away, it's absurd, right? I mean, it's so vastly superior to our modern education system that it's kind of mind-boggling. And which is like, let's find something these kids love to do, and let's figure out, okay, if you want to do that, you need to know math. If you want to know that, you need to understand how language works, right? And you just continue to nurture, and kids will learn on their own. We are built. Human beings are wired to learn. I mean, quite literally, that's how our wiring works. And so when we give kids the opportunity to go and just run buck wild and figure out how things work, they grow up and become problem solvers. And that's what our society needs more of. We need more problem solvers. We don't need more factory workers, which is what our educational system is designed for, which is absurd.
Absolutely. I have a fifth grader, and she does pretty well in math, but there are some things that she's gotten hung up on this year. And she keeps saying to me, Mom, like, I just don't understand why you want me to be good at something I don't care about. And I mean, it's not, I mean, she's got basic math down and they're doing algebra already, but it's this, a lot of the curriculum is based on keeping up, with state standards that are sort of arbitrarily set
up. You're so absurd.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I cannot, honestly, I'm like, well, because you need to know math. But beyond that, I'm like, she's got a point, right? Like, if we can unleash internal motivation inside of a child, a young adult, the potential for learning is so much greater. We know this, yet we've not practiced it. So I think that's great.
And you see a lot of chin scratching about this issue. Well, that people don't think for themselves anymore, or they don't know. The discourse is gone by the wayside. Well, when you get philosophy and rhetoric and some of these things that used to be required, or the creative arts, you get them. And you don't, then there's no mechanism for learning how to think for yourself. Coincidentally, Napoleon Hill also called that drift, that, 70 years before Court did, but the same idea of drifting along in society, just letting life happen to you, and you're sort of well-educated without advancing humanity. And boy, is there a lot of that. So.
There is.
In the spirit of change, so we're talking about changing the education system, back to business. So you take this same idea. I mean, humans are humans. It's just a varying arc of development, and this the human experience that drives all of society now. What if you could change one prevailing leadership habit that you see? What would it be? This could be in the business world, political world, however you want to answer that. One prevailing habit. And you get this magic wand to change it.
Oh my gosh. That is an almost impossible question. I think that it's not because there's like so many things I would change. It's because, man, if like everything, right now our system has a tendency to reward ruthless self-interest.
Yes.
And that's a huge problem, right? So you look at, people who are abusive, people who take advantage of others, and they continue to rise through the ranks. If you've read any great business book, it's touched on the fact that the most toxic people in an organization are your high performers who don't fit the culture, right?
Yeah.
And I went through this with the client recently, where you got a guy, I've got the owner of the company saying, I'm not sure this person belongs here. And then next thing I know, instead of removing him from the organization, they promoted him, right? And people are quitting left and right. And they're still unwilling. They're just, because all they're seeing is dollar signs.
Right.
It's our obsession with profit. When we already have it, I mean, it really is. It's. I can't remember where I read this. They said that in Native American culture, anybody who took more than they needed, it was considered a form of mental illness, right? Because it's and I think it really is. I mean, it's cancerous, right? And cells, and any organism that has to take more than what it needs is detrimental to its environment and then detrimental to the greater body. So I think that if there's one thing that I could address, it would be that. I don't know that it can be addressed.
No, it may not be, but that's why that was the magic part. That's a definite. I mean, we see that all the time. We see it even in the conversation about marketing. I mean, we're in the same industry, just in different areas, and the conversation about like the ROI of something. Well, there's a lot of things in life that don't have an ROI, like parenting, for example.
Yeah, terrible ROI.
Terrible ROI in parenting, right? And so this obsession with ROI is sort of a side like symptom of what you're talking about, which is taking these John Deming type industrial age models and jamming them into the human age economy. And so companies that like, for example, they think that we're still going to be profit obsessed, but we're going to allow people to wear blue jeans during the week so that they're happier about being profit obsessed and being worked to death. And they still don't get it at a fundamental level. They get it. It's kind of like with inequality or sexual harassment, is that, you know, there's a list of things you're not supposed to do, but it's suppressed down and the root issue isn't taken care of. And so these people get into power and they do stupid shit because they didn't address the root issue. And you see the same thing with that being driven by sort of greed and ignorance because of the level of power and authority or juice that you have.
Yeah, I love that you said that because, you know, talking to the millennials, right? Everybody's bitching about millennials. And what I love about, and I'm not saying that there's not some validity to some of those complaints, but what I'm seeing more than that is that what you have is a generation of kids who are like, this system's bullshit and we're not playing.
Yeah.
Right.
And they've seen their parents who like saved up their whole lives, had corporate jobs, retired well, and then some company somewhere made some bad decisions and the whole stock market took a shit, and now they're, you know, their parents, grandparents lost all their savings. CEO got a, you know, $100 million bailout. The company got bailed out, CEO got a bonus, and now their parents are going back having, you know, entry-level jobs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because all of their corporate skills are now completely outdated. It is a bullshit system. It's a total bullshit system. And I think that these kids are smart enough now. It used to be able to lie to people, right? But now they've all got phones. Like they can be like, yeah, no, I checked. You're full of crap, right? So they just don't have people that are complaining that these kids are lazy. I'm like, that's amazing, because if you look at an organization like Do Something, which is strictly millennials around the world, changing the world and not getting paid for it, like that doesn't look like lazy. It looks like maybe you just don't understand what their motivation.
Exactly.
Right? It's like if I keep offering, go ahead.
I was going to say, my husband and I were at an event this weekend. We were talking to the chief of police, who's this great guy. And he was saying, he's like, you know, they were talking about a certain spring training baseball in town. So they needed extra police officers to help with that. And he said, you know, I love my younger officers, but they like work-life balance. They don't want to work overtime. They're like, no, I'm good. See you later. So he's like, I appreciate that, but I got a real problem here, you know, trying to staff these things. But he said, I respect, you could see the battle in him, you know, a lot of respect, but also like, how do I deal with this? And that really stayed with me. I was thinking, you know, it is this whole other orientation to living and to purpose, work, and to, even in a more traditional industry, like, you know, law enforcement, it's more than just laziness. I think that's absolutely, it's simple.
They're not chasing the almighty dollar at all costs, right? And I worked with police officers like this where they would take every single overtime. And we had guys who, you know, were doubling their base salary working overtime, and they were so proud of it. Like they would bust their butts, and it was just to stack away that cash or invest it in the market. And I always kind of wondered, I mean, like, to what end? Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't keep in touch with a lot of these guys. I don't know if they retired wealthy or if they lost it all in the market or whatever, but I definitely know a lot of these younger folks who, like, it used to be a problem, like people trying to get organizations, people wouldn't take vacation. We're not seeing that problem with millennials. They're like, yo, peace, I'm out. Like, I will be in Tahiti for the next 2 weeks. And they're like, but you only have 2 weeks of vacation. They're like, exactly. Until they come home, and then when they accrue 2 more weeks of vacation, they are out. And you know what? They're freaking happy. Like, they're not saving up for some future maybe thing that could happen in 25, 30 years. I can live my life right now.
Yeah, you look at I saw this the other day that the average age of people that have read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week is around 18 to 21. That's the curve.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that was shocking to me. And so, you know, that came out 10 years ago. And so you're seeing this idea, even this microcosm of a thing about work, like you were saying about the overtime, and what you were saying about overtime is hours spent in the office. The more time you spend in the office at your desk, to a millennial, the dumber you are. That's foolishness. And I wonder sometimes if the impact of life hacking and looking for, ways to be more efficient and flex time. And, that's changed all that, what we say when we go out and talk to groups of what we call PMSers, pale, male, and stale. We say they're not coming back. They're not going to come walking back across this chasm to the way things used to be, because they don't need to. They have talent. They have each other. And even at a social level, you look, regardless of what you feel about this, someone feels about the Second Amendment, what these kids are doing after the Parkland massacre and how they're organizing, they're actually doing something in the sense of they're not just commenting on Facebook messages. They're doing something. And I think for a lot of leaders or a lot of managers of the old way, because I think a leader is only a single dimension thing. I think you're either a leader or you're not. I think these old school managers are seeing that type of thing and they're terrified of it. I think there's a deep fear with them. Yeah.
Because their command and control structures are falling apart, right? They're like, oh, well, I mean, they used to be able to threaten you with like, you can get somebody else. And they're like, okay, get somebody else.
Yes.
It's all good.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I think two things. They're terrified, and then a lot of the boomers are super impressed and fascinated by their children and by this spirit that they really had too at a certain time in their youth. And they were kind of crushed by, the greatest generation of like, no, but really, this is what you need to do. Right. But what I see in boomers now is like even the chief of police, he was sort of like, I gotta really admire that. I'm kind of thinking, I didn't spend any time with my daughters as they grew up. So I think that there is hope because there are leaders who see that is a better, or they're just curious at least of this new kind of age that's dawning.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, it's not just millennials, right? I mean, I think that the younger generations are always leading indicators, but you're seeing that, just in our generation, a little bit younger, they're saying we're the most nurturing fathers, maybe in history, at least in American history, that we spend time with our kids. Like that is a priority. I mean, you're seeing more and more, fathers who are with their kids when moms aren't around. Like it used to be, people would be like, if mom's not around, like, is she okay? Is she in the hospital? We're like, no, I'm just watching my kids for the weekend. Why are you freaking out? I mean, that has happened to me. People have been like, is your wife okay? I'm like, yeah, because we live a little bit outside of Austin in the more conservative enclaves. And I think that's by going away more and more. And I'm glad for that. That's absurd.
Yeah, but that's a whole other discussion. I was just having.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, it totally is.
No, but how parenthood, we've all had to up our game on parenting, and sometimes it's exhausting. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah. Tough. And I see, and we'll wrap. We have one kind of final question we like to ask, but just sort of wrapping this idea of reticence to change, is you get let's just call them the MAGA crowd, the red hat wearer crowd, that once the way things used to be, that's a much smaller crowd than the Gen Xers that are cynical. Mm-hmm. That you see a lot. It reminds me of the Ben Franklin quote. I had a lot of friends that died in their 40s and then they had their funerals in their 70s. Where they're just, there's this, especially with men in our generation, there's this deep sense of despair. And then so when they see this fresh, idealistic, flexible, innovative, creative millennial, they're the ones even more threatened by, because I think Yem's right. I think boomers are much more open to millennials than what people realize, because partially they're the rock and roll generation and we're the latchkey generation. And so we're just got a little cynicism to us. And I refuse to live like that. I have great optimism for our future.
So we always end with this question, which is synthesis. Our favorite definition is competing or differing realities that come together to create a higher level of truth. And so for you, is there kind of a truth that has come out of your life of paradox and living in different conditions and seeing a lot of inside of a lot of different organizations? Is there one truth that has sort of guided you or that has emerged out of these paradoxes?
Just the softballs here, huh?
Yeah. Again, we just like to begin and end with softballs.
Right.
It sounds a little trite.
It's all right. It's coming from you. It won't be trite.
Doesn't sound like anything yet.
See each other. You know, there's so much divisiveness right now. I mean, I spoke with someone earlier this year or last year, I guess. And I said then, and I've said it since. I kind of vacillate back and forth between hopefulness. Mm-hmm. I'll have a conversation with Justin and I'll feel hopeful, and then I'll have a conversation with, I don't know, anybody else. I'll feel like, we're so screwed. The world's going to hell in a handbasket. There are days I'm legitimately scared for what the future of our society holds and whether or not we're going to have one. And then you go read a book by like Homo Deus by Noah Yuval Harari, which is not one of those books you read to make yourself feel better about the world. My fallback is a quote, which I know I'll butcher a little bit, that basically says it's impossible to know somebody's story and not love them. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, we all have the same wiring, right? We're all here on this planet. We all have a fraction of time in the grand scheme of things to exist, and we're all just trying to make the most of that time in whatever way makes the most sense to us. And so much of the really awfulness in the world is just confusion.
Yeah. Fear. Yeah. There's a whole separate podcast about that.
Yeah.
Well, you are fascinating. I'm glad that you made time for us. And how do people find you? What's the best way for people to go find you and sort of follow your stuff?
See, this is not the humble side of me. I pride myself in being highly Googleable, right? So if you Google Elijah May, you will find me. I'm just Elijah@experiencefirm.com. I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm pretty open to connections from anybody. I always want to meet new people and have new conversations. As long as somebody's LinkedIn profile doesn't say lead gen expert, then I will probably connect with them.
Or affiliate marketer. Or here's the latest one. Is the cryptocurrency movement. That's fine. But I wonder the convergence of the word hustle with cryptocurrency people is an overlapping circle. You know what I'm saying? It's like, good night. Anyway, it will end on that editorial making fun of cryptocurrency. We'll make fun of vegans and CrossFitters another time. Well, we appreciate you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, guys.